Good morning, Loft. So good to be here with you, and glad you made it out on this special back-to-school weekend. And I know many of you joined us this past Thursday night as we had really an impromptu prayer service about what's going on in our nation and how divided we are. So thank you for being at that, and please continue to pray for our nation that this might be a time where some kind of real spiritual awakening would occur, that we would realize that we need something greater than ourselves and left and right and black and white. We need something that will bring us together. So pray for that, please. Well, listen, very often when I speak in church, when I've talked about something that's very real life, very practical, maybe dealing with unpleasant truths about ourselves or how to make relationships work or overcoming failure, someone will come up to me and shake my hand and with a smile will say, I wish I had heard you teach that 30 years ago. It really would have helped me. And I always look back at them and I never smile and I always tell them the same thing. I say, 30 years ago, I hadn't made enough mistakes yet to teach you what you heard this morning. Life is a great teacher, but it's not like school. In school, first you get the lesson, then you take the test. In life, first you get the test, then you learn the lesson. So very often, life lessons, they come to us, but only with pain and suffering and embarrassment and mistakes. But there is a better way to learn life lessons than learning from your own mistakes, and that's learning from the mistakes of others. But we are not inclined to do so. Will Rogers put it this way, and I'm cleaning it up a bit. He said, some men just have to grab onto the electric fence themselves. And some of us just have to do that. But in case you're one of the ones that's willing to learn from the mistakes and the experiences of others, we have this series we're beginning today, Schooled, Life Lessons from a Slow Learner. And I think that growing up, I had this wrong idea. I had this idea that growing old was pretty much the same as growing up. I think most kids do. You look at adults and they seem to have it all together. They're older, they're bigger, they're smarter, they have jobs, they shave, they drive cars, they act like they know what they're supposed to do, they talk like they know what they're talking about, and you look up and you just think, well, these adults, they're grown-ups, right? Well, I have learned that growing old is not the same as growing up. I got a little lesson in this when I was in seminary in Massachusetts. Peggy and I had moved up there. We were there for 4 years. And our landlord was a dear old man by the name of Clifton Sibley. He was about 80 years old. And he was a crusty New Englander on the outside, but inside he was warm-hearted and kind. Now, his wife, Rebecca, not so much. She was a tough old bird. And I remember she had gone on a trip, and Mr. Sibley came home with a pre-owned car that he'd just bought. And the next day, he asked me to follow him to the repair shop so he could drop the car off and I'd bring him home. And as we were driving back, I said, Mr. Sibley, it's not really any of my business, but I know you just bought that car. Did it have a problem when you bought it, or you just found out something? What? He was silent for a moment, and then he slowly said, well, Rob, Mrs. Sibley and I, and that's how he did refer to her, Mrs. Sibley and I, we've been looking for a car, and she's gone on this trip, and I thought I found just the perfect one, and I bought it. And then I got it home, and I realized that it didn't have something that she thinks is real important. I said, what's that? He said, automatic transmission. And I thought that while she's still on the trip, I would have the standard transmission removed and have an automatic transmission put in its place. Now, when I've told people that, they say, Rob, that's impossible. I've always told them, you think that's impossible because you don't know Rebecca Sibley, okay? And then he said, so Rob, since I don't plan on saying anything to Mrs. Sibley about this, perhaps it's best if you don't either. You understand. Oh yeah, I understood. I understood he was not going to handle his problem like a grown-up man, so we little boys had better stick together so neither one of us got in trouble. Growing old is not the same as growing up. I learned that when a woman by the name of Molly, 75 years old, burst into my office. I was a young pastor in Atlanta, Texas, and she demanded that I fire one of our best staff members, a young woman by the name of Jill. I said, whatever for? She said, well, you know, I'm the president of the seniors group. Yes. And Jill called and said that the church was going to sponsor a grief seminar and wondered if the seniors might give a little money to bring someone in to speak. I said yes, and they've had the seminar, and I've given the money, and now it's gone. And I realized I shouldn't have said yes until first I spoke with the other officers of the seniors group. I said, Molly, it seems like you made a decision that you now regret, and your solution is I fired Jill. How does that make any sense? She said, because she should have never called me. That's why. She should have never put me on the spot. That's why you should fire her. Well, I understood that 75-year-old Molly was not going to handle her problem like a grown-up adult. Growing older is not the same thing as growing up. I learned that after being here for 6 years. Peggy and I went away. That was right out of seminary. We were away for 13 years. We come back, and I see people that when I left, they were just beginning their faith, just reconnecting. And after 13 years, some of them had been transformed. Some of them were really men and women of God. They loved Christ. They were walking with Him. They knew the Scriptures. They knew how to pray. They had a heart for missions. They were involved in ministry to others. They'd grown up. And I looked at some of their friends, and 13 years after I had known them, as far as I could tell, they hadn't changed a bit. Same church, same sermons, same opportunities. Some had grown up over 13 years. Some seemed not to have grown at all. I look at myself, and I see someone who gets angry over little things that ought to just blow off. I see someone who holds a grudge too long. I see someone who worries about things I don't need to worry about, who won't deal with problems that would probably go away if I just turned around and addressed them. I'd look at myself, and I discover that people make me nervous. I mean, not all people, just pretty much people like y'all, but people make me nervous, and I think, Rob, you are a bona fide adult male. Somewhere along the way, you should have grown up a little bit more than you have. Growing old is not the same as growing up. One is automatic. The other is optional. As a matter of fact, it's hard work. Look what the Apostle Paul wrote, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. He says, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. So at first, we all experience life as a child. We all think like a child. We all react like a child. We all have emotions that are childish. But Paul says there comes a time when you decide to grow up and you have to put away those childish things. Now, the Greek word for put away is katergeo. It means to release someone from a binding power. It is a strong and a deliberate verb. And what that tells us is that growing up does not just happen. It requires great effort. It requires real intention. You have to be deliberate and purposeful. Now, something else I've learned, and this is simply another way of telling you what I've already said, is that it is incredibly easy to coast through life. As a matter of fact, it is as easy as hell, and I use that term purposefully. And if you have kids here with you, you can go home and explain why it's okay for the pastor to say that and them not. But I have learned that it is as easy as hell not to be thoughtful about our lives, not to be reflective about the decisions we make, not to be intentional about who we want to be and how we live. I mean, you look at people who take their lives, their professional life, so seriously. Many people do. They have a plan. They have goals. They know where they are. They know where they want to be, by what time, and they work that plan so they can get there. And yet, the most important areas of their lives, if you were to ask them what's most important to you, they would say God, family, then job. The most important part of their lives, they have no plan, no goals, no real intentions of how they're going to grow in those areas. I have learned that coasting is one of the easiest and most dangerous things that we will ever do, because over time you never coast up to something better. but only down to something worse. So, how about you? These most important areas of your life, your marriage, your relationship with your kids, your pursuit of God and His will for your life, are you doing the hard work that will cause you to grow up? Or is there any chance that you have settled in, gotten comfortable, and maybe begun to coast? This is a good time to think about these things. That's why we're doing it now. School, that's still kind of written into our psychic DNA. The first of the year, we set new goals, and then when we come to school time, that's still in us. Something new is beginning. It's a time to learn something new, to grow in some new ways, and that's why we have this series, Schooled. And there's not a better topic to begin with than this. How do we stop coasting, and how do we start growing up emotionally and spiritually? The first thing I would say, if you want to step into this picture of a life that's growing, is that we need to determine our goal. So I'm going to ask you a question. This is the question I hope you take home with you today. What do you want? What do you want? Now, I'm not asking you what do you need, because when it comes to needs, we're all alike. We all need air to breathe, food to eat, a place where we're safe. We all need someone to love and someone to love us. When it comes to needs, we're all the same. It's our wants that make us different. It's your wants that determine where you go in life, how you live, and who you become. So what do you want? When the day comes that someone has to get up and remember your life before others, what do you want that person to be able to say about you? What is the legacy that you want to have left? What is the difference that you want to have made? Now, if what you want out of life is to make a lot of money, acquire a lot of nice things, create a life for yourself that is easy and comfortable, if what you want out of life is to get to retirement with enough resources that you are able to travel as much as you desire, I bet you can achieve that. I got a lot of confidence in you. I bet you can achieve those goals. But I pray to God, I'm not the poor preacher that has to get up one day and remember your life. I pray to God, I'm not the guy that has to get up there and fumble for words and try to make people believe that somehow you figured out what life is about and you lived an exemplary life and that you were following Jesus. I mean, I can be pretty creative verbally, but if that's what you leave me with, you wanted money, you wanted stuff, you wanted comfort, you wanted ease, you wanted fun. If that's what you leave me with, man, you are leaving me with nothing, with freaking nothing. So what do you want? Listen to your heart. Not just what do you want to do with your life, who do you want to be? You want to be a man after God's own heart? You want to be a woman who loved the Lord her God with all that she is? You want to be a bringer of light. You want to be a healer of souls. You want to be an encourager to the downtrodden. You want to be a champion for justice. You want to be an instrument of God's grace and mercy in this world. You want to be a heart that's broken for the things that break the heart of God. You can be that person, but only if you desire that. See, our natural tendency is to live for ourselves, our names and our kingdom. And people do that, and they are feted. They are celebrated. They are admired for achieving those things. And if that's what you want, you can travel that road with them. You can coast downhill with them and never even know it. You want to live a different way, you have better come to realize that there is a calling on your life that has marked you and has made you different than the people who don't know Jesus. And you'd better desire something different than they do. Have a different goal. So what I would encourage you to do today is take a few minutes, ask yourself, what do I really want? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to become? And write down those answers. Write them down. Put them someplace where you'll see them. Remind yourself during the daily drudgery of life, wait a second, I'm living for something greater. I have a higher goal. This is who I want to become. And bring that to God regularly. Lord, make me this person. This is my heart. This is my desire. Set your goal. Now, the second thing we need to do is we need to change the patterns of our lives. It's great to desire something higher, but we've got to create patterns that lead us to that place. We don't really get better by doing something different once in a while. We don't grow physically. We don't get into shape physically because we go for a run every so often. We don't grow our muscles because we get to the gym whenever we feel like it. There has to be a new pattern, a pattern that changes us. That's how we become someone different. We get into a pattern of being, a pattern of behavior, and over time it transforms who we are. Look what Paul wrote to his son in the faith, Timothy. Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying, and everyone should accept it. Now, the Greek word for train in those verses, if you wrote it in English letters, would be G-Y-M, you see that? G-Y-M-N-A-Z-E, gymnase. And it has the word gym in it. And so what Paul is telling Timothy and telling us, get yourself to God's gym. Get your spiritual self to God's gym and work it out. Begin patterns regularly that train you for the things of God, that make you different than you were before. If you grew up down south, you know something that Northerners who just moved here don't know, which is just because school started and September's around the corner, that does not mean that fall is anywhere near coming. I always love it. There's a little cool snap. It goes down to 85. And then folks have moved down from north. Oh, fall's here. No, sugar. We're going to be at 98 back in October. I can promise you. But you know that. But if you've grown up down south, you have been influenced by what's called a revivalistic mentality. And that is the idea that God will swoop into a life in a single instant and change that person's heart and change that person's life forever. And God can and God does move on us. And in an instant, he does change our hearts. But change our lives, that's a different matter. Change how we think, what we value, how we handle stress, how we handle temptation, how we handle difficult people. For that kind of life change to occur, we have to get into different patterns. We have to stop old patterns, and the best way to stop an old pattern is to replace it with a new pattern. So even though you know Christ, even though your heart has been changed, that doesn't necessarily change your life. It doesn't make you that person that you want to be. You doing the work, you getting yourself to God's gym, giving yourself this spiritual workout, that's how you were trained for God's kingdom. So let's get practical for a minute. Some patterns, some habits of your life. Are you in the pattern of having a daily time with God? First thing in the morning, last thing at night, you pick up God's word, you read some, you think about it, you ask God to show you how it applies to you, and you pray about it, and then whatever else is on your heart. If you're not, just begin with the Gospel of John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, fourth book in the New Testament. Just read a chapter. It'll take you 3 or 4 minutes. Spend 3 or 4 minutes looking at it. How does this apply to me? What is God saying? Lord, show me what you want me to see. Then pray about that and pray about whatever else is on your heart. Maybe 15 minutes. It's a little thing, but it is changing a pattern. It is putting yourself in the presence of God. It's inviting God to speak into your life. It's telling God, I want to be that person. I want you to change me to that person that I desire to be. It will change you. Or you're reading good literature, whether it's Christian literature or just good secular literature that is deep and that opens your eyes to what it means to be human and to struggle and what people need. Some people, they tell me that their pattern is they've started redeeming the time that they drive back and forth to work. They listen on iTunes, or they get CDs of old sermons, whether Mark Sorensen or Dr. Rob or me or Michelle, and they listen to those, or old Quest lectures. They listen to those either as they're driving or when they're exercising. It's a pattern that's in their lives of getting God's word and things that uplift you into their hearts and into their minds. A small group. Michelle's done such great work putting together 13 different possibilities, something really for just about everybody. You may say, well, that's not really me. Change your pattern. Give it a shot. You're not signing up forever. You're signing up for 4, 6, 8 weeks. When it's over, you say, no, really not for me. Or you say, you know what? I've gotten to know some people. This idea of sharing life with others as we try to grow in Christ, this is really a good thing. These people encourage me. They inspire me. I've been able to help some. This feels good. One night a week, one night every 2 weeks, whatever that group does. It's not a huge commitment, but it's changing a pattern. It's a pattern that will make you ultimately who you want to be. I want to encourage you to look at your life, remember what you desire, and then change some pattern that will make you more into that person that your heart says, that's who I want to be. I'm going to show you a clip from a movie called Click. And it's an Adam Sandler movie, which means there are parts that are absolutely awful and there are parts that are absolutely wonderful. That's just what he does, man. So this is a movie about a guy who is given a magic remote. And it allows him to rewind to things that he's experienced, that he wants to experience again. And it also allows him to fast forward through times in life that he'd rather not go through. Times that are repetitive, boring, difficult, challenging. And he uses it primarily to fast forward through those times so that he can get back to work. That's his goal. He wants to make partner, he wants to make a lot of money, he wants to be a success. And so he fast forwards through times, often family times, where he and his wife are having difficulties, or where the kids are doing crazy things, or it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Really, all the things in life that teach us lessons about patience and kindness and compassion and putting other people first. And his pattern is life is about me, about my success, my happiness, my getting ahead. And he doesn't change that pattern as his son is growing up or as his father is growing old. And in this scene, his father has died, and he can't go back to the time that his father died because he wasn't there. He was at work. But instead, he goes back to the last time that he saw his father, and what he really sees is himself. The patterns that he formed that then formed him. Let's watch. So we all form patterns, usually without being aware of them, and then these patterns form us. Patterns about how we use our time, patterns about how we relate to other people, patterns about how we handle pressure, patterns in how we seek or don't seek God. So here's what I want you to do. You're going to try to figure out what is it that you want, who do you want to be. Let me just encourage you to change one pattern. Add something or take something away. Add something that will get you to that goal. Your patterns form you, so be intentional about the patterns that you form. Here's the last thing I would encourage you to do, and that is if we're really going to grow up, we have got to do some things that make us uncomfortable. We all try to create patterns in our life that keep our life safe and predictable, that keep our lives comfortable. It's very understandable. But patterns that are safe and predictable and comfortable don't create lives that are big or hearts that are wise. They only create people that are small, hearts that are shallow. If you and I are really going to grow up, we're going to have to get into situations where we get in over our heads. We're going to have to get into situations where we don't know what to think, what to do, what to say, where we really need God to come through. And usually that means getting involved with others who are hurting and struggling, getting involved in what a churchy word is, ministry to those. You may be attracted to some part of ministry that's very different than me, but all of us need to be stepping into the hurts and the needs of the world, and in such a way that we don't know what to do, don't know what to say, where we have to pray like we've never prayed, trust God like we've never trusted him, and take a chance in a way that we never have before. When you think about growth, you think about physical growth. Your muscles grow only when they are stressed, only when they're made to do something that they haven't done before. And that's how we grow spiritually. We step into something that we're not comfortable with. We don't know if we can pull off, and we need God to come through. We see him come through, and that makes us stronger and makes us ready for the next challenge. A few years back, I started meeting with a man. You'd really like him if you got to know him. He's very bright, very witty, a compassionate heart, and really honest. And that's what I like most about him. He didn't go to our church. He was sent to me by a counselor. And he was very honest about his life. He was really honest about the mistakes that he'd made, and he'd made some big ones. He was really honest about the problems that were going on in his family, many of them due to him, and they were big. And he was really honest with me that he didn't believe in Jesus. But I could tell this, if he ever did come to faith, it would take over his life. He just seemed like that kind of person. It wouldn't be something that lived in his head or even in his heart. It would be something that he would have to live out. And thank God he did come to real faith in Christ. And sure enough, he said, what do I do next? How do I really grow? What do I do? I said, look, you have been very successful in the corporate world. We need to get you someplace where all those skills won't do you any good. You're one of the brightest people I know. We need to get you someplace where your intellect will not help you one bit. We need to put you in a place where you have to depend on God and you get to see him at work. And I know just the place. It's called Kairos. Many of the men in our church, they go on this. It's a 4-day spiritual retreat for men who are in prison. They stay in prison. You go there. You hear the bars shut behind you, and you are with men that you never would have met, that you may not be able to relate to, and you sit at a table with them. They hear talks, and you listen, and you love, and you care, and you pray, and you ask God to come and change their hearts. I think that's what you ought to do. He said, fine. Now, here's what he wrote to me after that first weekend. He says, you were definitely right. Kairos took me out of my comfort zone, way out. Among the 6 guys at my table, one was a murderer with a life sentence. Another was a member of the Mexican mob who spent 8 years in solitary. Another was convicted of armed robbery and assault. You may find it strange, but I had a lot more in common with these men than you might imagine. For one thing, we all wish we'd done better by our families. And we all found ourselves with a giant God-shaped hole in our lives. They did some very bad things. Most of them are right where they need to be, but that does not mean that they do not need God, just like me. A year ago, I would have rolled my eyes at the religious nuts standing in a hallway, passing out cookies to convicts and saying, God bless you, or singing hymns in the parking lot. Now I am one of those nuts. I showed my wife a picture of me with these men. She could not get over how happy I look. He's continued to serve in that ministry and many others, and he is a man who got in over his head, out of his comfort zone, and who was transformed by that experience. This church offers so many different ways for you to step into the lives of others and their needs. I want to encourage you to do that in some way. Care about others. Get in touch with people that your life might not naturally cross paths with, so that you have to think, pray, cry, wonder in ways that you never had, in ways you need God to come through, and where you discover that his grace is sufficient. Make yourself uncomfortable. So who do you want to be when you're all grown up? I got confidence in you. You can be that person. God and you together, you can be who in your heart of hearts you want to be. And you can change today a pattern that will help you get there. And I will pray that God will get you in over your head so that you cry out to him and you see him work through you in ways you've never imagined. Growing old is not the same as growing up. Really growing up may not make your life easy, but it will make it good. As a matter of fact, it's the only kind of life that will fill the deepest desires of your heart. Let's pray. Gracious God, I pray for those of us who are here, myself included. I pray that your Spirit will hound us and bother us and trouble us until we purposefully ask and answer the question, who do I want to be? And I pray that you will bring a picture to each one of us, a beautiful picture of who we are and what we are to do in this world as your instruments, as your servants, as your presence in this world. Give us something high and beautiful and glorious to step into. Lord, I pray you'd give us something very practical, a way that we can change a pattern that will give you room to work in our lives. And Lord, this is a scary prayer. Get us in over our heads. Get us in touch with people who are needy and broken and crying out, people that we don't have answers for. All we have for is love. All we have for is prayer. All we have for is being there. All we have for them is you. And bring us to that place where we learn that is enough. Grow us up, Lord, in Jesus. Amen.